the Kahoot mostly focused on the constructed response portion of your test, and so many people did so terrible on that one. But that's not to say you can't do better, especially since on the retake, which is tomorrow, you are allowed to use that green paper from Friday. If you were not here Friday, make sure you get a green paper from me so that you can take notes on that paper and have something to help you a bit tomorrow when we retake it. So when I'm standing over there, you can just come get it from me. You do have to take notes during the Kahoots, and it could be on the green paper, or like you have to take notes regardless. So if you're not doing it on the green paper, I put some of the Kahoot papers in the baskets on your desk. If you need more from like other desks, then that's fine, get it from another table. Because again, I would really encourage you to do it on your green paper so that you can use it tomorrow. It's training. But for entering the Kahoot, I don't care if it's your phone, I don't care if it's your Chromebook. You might want your Chromebook open so that you can have Desmos anyway. But no matter what, you have to take notes. I don't know how to make that more clear. I said it like 5 times. Still, people don't have something in front of them to take notes on. It can be your green paper, or it can be your like a white paper out of the baskets. If there's not any more at your table, go get one from another table. Okay. So factor x squared plus 13x. Factor it. Okay, so factoring, how do I know if it's in factored form? Tiana, sit up. How do I know if it's in factored form? Okay, there would be parentheses, it would be something that you can multiply. Right now it's in standard form, I can't like do any multiplying because it's already in the simplest form. Now for factoring, can I do the diamond method with this? No. And why not? It's not a ton. Perfect. I don't know like what happened this unit with some people, but I promise I did teach you everything. I also did record me teaching it, and it's been there. We use the skills almost every day. You cannot do diamond method if it's not a trinomial, right? There's other steps you follow. Usually one of those steps is setting it equal to 0. So you can solve for the zeros. This one just said to factor, it didn't say to solve. But on your test, it'll say, why does putting it in factor form enable us to solve it? So let's talk about that. When we factor, we want it to be equal to 0. So if it's not, set it equal to 0. Then what do you look for next? You always look for this anytime it asks you to factor. And remember, always take notes as we go, but what do we look for first when we factor? No. Good, GCF, greatest common factor. So is there a greatest common factor between the numbers? So 1 and 13 are the coefficients. Is there a GCF? If one of the numbers is 1, then no. No GCF. Do they both have an X term? So since it's only two terms and they both have an x term, I can factor out at least an x. You always factor out whatever's the smallest. So between x squared and x to the first, x would be the smallest. And that will live outside your parentheses. Inside is what you get from dividing each term by your GCF. So it's like the opposite of distributing. Instead of multiplying by the number outside, you are dividing by your GCF. What's x squared divided by x? Good. We know that, but like, so you mean that some people don't. And when you have the same thing on top and bottom of a fraction, what happens? So like what I mean by same thing, this x and this x, both are x to the first power. So that would cancel to 1, which basically just leaves me with a plus 13 for that term. That's what goes in the parentheses. So that's answering this Kahoot question correctly. This is the factor form. How does that help us solve for the zeros? What do we call zeros additionally? X-intercepts, solution. So when they say solve this, how does it help us solve? How does it help us find the x-intercepts? So someone tell me. How does having it in factor form help us find the x-intercepts? Something to put on your green paper. So that way you could refer back to it and almost say it exactly like you would right now. How does having it in factor form set equal to 0 help us solve for the zeros? Once upon a time in unit 6, I had you just look at this and tell me what the zeros are. Remember, I had you tell me the pattern. So what are the zeros? Okay. So how does having it in, you're right, by the way, how does having it in factor form help us figure out what the zeros are? So a lot of you said that on your test, that it just makes it easier to see. Be a little more specific. Because otherwise it's just like, I don't give you like a 1 or a 6. Yes? So you could solve by applying your zero product property. What does the word product mean? Something with multiplication. Good, the answer to a multiplication problem. If the answer to a multiplication problem is 0, one of the factors must be good. So you set each factor equal to 0. Normally you do x times the parentheses, right? So this is where like my factors split. Set them both equal to 0 and solve them separately for what 0 has to be. This one's easy because x is already isolated. Over here was opposite of adding 13. And that's why the other 0 was negative 13. 0 minus 13. Now it's like that. But yeah, any questions on that? So zero product property. Tell me, like, if something multiplies it gives me 0, one of the factors is 0, that's why it's better to solve when it's back. So memorize. Or write it on your green paper, just remember to look at it. Okay, next one. Remember to take notes as we go, I'm checking as we go too. So which of the following is not a step in solving a quadratic like this by factoring? 5x squared equals 30x. Which would not be a step in solving this quadratic. Remember to take notes as we go, friends. Once you put your answer in, jot some stuff down. Okay.
Okay, so let's see, hold on, actually. Using the diamond method is not a step for this one. Why? Good, you can only use the diamond method when it's a trinomial, so a 3-term. So that doesn't mean it's not solvable by factoring. You still follow the same steps. So the first step is to set the equation equal to 0. So right now, and really you can move it either direction, but it'd probably be easier to have the x squared term be positive. So I would move the 30x. And a lot of people did this because it said to solve it by rewriting it, really solve it by factoring. But a lot of people wrote it like this. Why is this incorrect? You can't just move the 30x. You have to cancel it on one side. So how do I make the 30x cancel out completely? Good. So you do it on the right side in order to cancel it out. And the rule is whatever you do on one side is the equal sign. And notice on the left side, they are not like terms. So you just end up writing it as 5x squared minus 30x, not plus. Okay. Because you have to subtract it in order to cancel it out. Make sense? Okay. From there, so first is set the equation equal to 0, then what do? Look for a GCF. You always check for a GCF first, even if it's a trinomial. You always check for a GCF first. What is my GCF between 5 and 30? Good, your GCF can never be bigger than your smallest number. So always see if your smallest number is it. So sometimes it is. 5 does divide evenly into both 5 and 30. So 5 is the GCF. Also, can I factor out any x's? So you always check that next. If they both have an x term, don't include the 0 in your terms. If they both have an x term, you can factor out an x. You always take the smallest one. So would I take the x squared or the x to the first? Okay, good. So 5x is my GCF. That will go outside parentheses. Inside parentheses, I get from dividing each term by my GCF. If you have the same thing, like same exact thing on top and bottom of a fraction, it cancels. So like 5 over 5 cancels to 1. What's x squared divided by x? And then over here, x over x cancels with negative 30 divided by 5. And now it's in factored form. Step 3 would be to set each factor equal to 0 and solve for x. Now, you will be typing in to a box tomorrow. It'll say, what will it say? It'll say solve this by rewriting it. Factor it, or give me some sort of reasoning for how you rewrote it. But the solutions part is most of the answer, like it's most of the points. So this one was worth like 10 points the first time, 2 points for work shown, 4 points for each answer. I know you all know how to type things in a dozen. So there's no reason you can't get at least an 8 out of 10 on this portion just from telling me the right solutions, even if you don't know how to graph, or not how to graph, how to factor. Because it was 5x squared equals 30x. All right, the solutions are going to be 0 and 6. They will be. The factored form, if you want to check if you factored it right, you can type in what you put for your factored form. And if it is right, it should be like the exact same thing. Or the exact same zeros at least. If you put it equal to 0, then it should look the exact same. But yeah, there's no reason you guys can't get at least an 8 out of 10 on that portion just by checking your graphing calculator. Okay. But otherwise, you set each factor equal to 0 and figure out what x has to be. So what times 5 will give me 0? That one's one of my answers. what minus 6 will give me 0? So another one. Okay. Something like that. You do not do diamond method for this. Please don't try to do that. Okay. So then next one. Why is dividing 5x squared equal to 30x by 5x not a reliable way to solve the equation? Why is this not reliable? A lot of these other choices I put here are actual things that people said, by the way. Some people said, oh, you actually can, like, just listen to the question. It says, why is it not reliable? So we're already saying it's not reliable. No, not just because it would make it harder. You can divide by x, like we did it just earlier, like, and look what happens when we divide both sides by 5x. So 5 over 5 cancels. What's x squared divided by x? Over here, x over x cancels. What's 30 divided by 5? Which we solved this exact problem in the last problem. We solved it the right way. Why is this one not a reliable method? It only gives us one of the solutions. It gives us the x equals 6, which we solved for just a few minutes ago. It doesn't give us the x equals 0. So, yeah. That's why. Be able to say that tomorrow. It only gives us one of the solutions, and there's 2. So on to the next one. So create a factored expression that would be equivalent to this, in which b is positive. X squared plus bx minus 6b. Create a factored expression that would be equivalent to that, where b is positive. Okay. So know that you will not have options tomorrow. It'll just be a box where you type in your answer. But since this is a trinomial and there's no GCF because A is 1 and not all of them have X terms, what method can you use to help you solve this? The diamond method. So that's what I would recommend. I mean, really, this is just a way to organize your information. When it's a trinomial, there's no GCF, you should expect your answer to look something like this, where it's like parentheses, x plus or minus a number, parentheses, x plus or minus a number, depending on what would make your diamond work. So I saw lots of answers that looked nothing like this, or they had extra stuff outside the parentheses. It should be this structure, and if you had this structure and you were still wrong, I at least gave you some points, because at least you showed me what it could have looked like. So to set up my diamond, it's always A times C on top. What's my A times C here? So negative 60. B on the bottom. And they didn't give us a value for B, just that it had to be positive. So it can be any 2 numbers. Like there's lots more answers other than just this red option. But see how the red option works. A positive 60 times a negative 1 does give me negative 60. And when I add it, what does it give me? That's a positive number. So that's why this one worked. There's lots of other numbers that multiply to 60 though. So for 30 times 2, For it to work, it would have to be a positive 30 and a negative 2. So that when I add it, I get a positive. When I multiply it, I get a negative. If you did 20 times 3, the 20 would have to be positive, the 3 would have to be negative. If you did 15 times 4, the 15 would have to be positive, the 4 would have to be negative. All you need is one pair of numbers that multiplies. I would recommend 1 times the number. You really can't go wrong there. Play around with the negative to where it gives you what it requires, a positive value for B or a negative one. So since it was this, the positive 60 and a negative 1, that's how you write your answer. Questions there? So then here's the next one. Okay, so this gives the profits that a show made selling tickets at $D. When is the profit $0? When is the profit $0?
On your first try at your constructed response, it was on paper. You had to write the equation and show reasoning. Tomorrow on your retake, you just have to tell me the answers. So hopefully that eliminates some of the stress. There's lots of ways you could get your answers. You could do quadratic formula, factoring, not completing the square for this one because I never taught it to you when A is not 1. What else could you do that's probably the easiest under a time constraint? Good. So that's what I would recommend. Because for tomorrow, I'm not making you show me your work because it'll be typed in the computer for this question. You can still show your work for other questions. But for this one, I would type it in Desmos. It will do the function notation if you put P of D. But otherwise, just make the D's X's, because that's where the X would normally go. Okay, now, where do I know to look at for my answer? The x-axis, because solutions are also called x-intercepts. And we're talking about how much something will cost. So how many decimals should I round to? 2 decimals. If you round wrong or you give me too many places after the decimal, you will lose some points, not all points. But like, if we're talking about money, you should have 2 decimal spots. Is that my only answer? It looks like it at first. How can I see my other answer? Zoom out. Most of the time, there are 2 solutions. So zoom out, check. My other solution is on my other x-intercept, which is about $79.12. At those prices, and are they both reasonable? Like, could I sell tickets for those prices? Possible, it's not like they're negative, right? So I would include both of those as my answers. If one of them was negative, I would not include it, that negative one, it wouldn't make sense. But if they both are possible, then list them both. Questions there? And round them appropriately. Okay. So next one. And there are 2 answers, so there you go. Same function, would the theater make a profit if they sell tickets for $80? If so, what is the profit? Did they make a profit if they sold tickets for $80? If so, what is the profit?
Okay. So, no, they would not make a profit. Two ways to figure it out. First of all, we already established that this is their x-intercepts. All in between those numbers, you can see the U shape. If I zoom out, you can't really see it that well, but it's there. I promise. Everything in between, and you can even click on it. And you can see at this ticket price, that's the profit, so that's how you can drag to whatever input it wants and see what the profit is. But if the profit is 80, here's probably the easier way to tell. Since that's the ticket price, you plug it in for the X or the D into your given equation and see if the answer is reasonable. Make sure you type it in right too, because earlier I typed it in wrong, which of course then changes it. Is that a profit negative $200? So the profit, there is no profit. They don't make a profit. Okay. I don't think we have time for the last question, but the question I'm pretty sure was like, do they make a profit at $40? So if I change that to 40, yes, they would make a profit, and the profit's 42 cents. Use your common sense. Questions, comments, concerns? Okay. Now, the green paper is what you can use as your cheat sheet tomorrow. If you do not have one, because you were not here Friday, you could probably get one from me now